Hello and good morning. My name is Adam Champy, and I'm the product lead on the Google Cast SDK. And I figure since it's 9 a.m. on a Friday, it's pretty appropriate to talk about what most people do in the evening, which is connect to entertainment. And for those of you who were partying last night or out the night before as well, thank you very much for getting up early to join us today. I'm first going to talk about the next generation. And this is my son, who apparently really loves TV. And my wife and I literally bought a device that tried to keep him staring away from the TV. But he's evolved. He's learned to watch content pretty much in any position. But what's tricky for us, we hope he doesn't love TV as much as I do. Honestly, I love watching sports. I love watching The Daily Show, casting The Daily Show. I love watching the Red Sox. I live on the West Coast, so the way I connect with the Red Sox, which is a baseball team on the East Coast, is through the MLB app. I also love watching the Boston Celtics. I especially like watching the Boston Celtics beat the Golden State Warriors, which are one of the only teams to do that. But, you know, I have to take, they're out of the playoffs right now, but the Warriors are still in the playoffs, so they're doing kind of well. But the experience that we have around the media I'm talking about, a lot of it is driven by how we connect to that media. I like to watch the Red Sox wherever I am. I like to watch The Daily Show if I'm traveling or on the road. I connect to that experience via apps on my mobile devices, my tablet or my phone. And I also love that experience of extending it on the most beautiful displays in my home, including the Vizio P series that's on the wall. And this experience is driven by Google Cast, and that's what I'm going to spend a bunch of time today talking about. And that experience is connected to these larger screens through what we call the Cast button. And I'll take you through a little bit of the Cast experience so that you're more familiar with it for those of you who aren't. The Cast button is a single button that's added to any one of the existing apps that play media, video, or audio that extends media to the large screen, to extender devices like Chromecast, Cast TVs, or Android TVs, as well as audio devices. So you can connect to speakers in your home. Integrated speakers are Cast for audio products, or Chromecast audio, which extends the audio experience to your existing speakers. And this is just a simple press of the Cast button that connects to this larger home. We've enabled thousands of apps. So for the end consumer, this is awesome. The apps they already have on their phone or their tablet work. They don't have to do anything else. For the developer, this is what we're going to talk about today. And we're going to talk about specifically if you want to become one of these apps, or if you already are, what we have in store in our new Google Cast SDK. And what's awesome about this is it's also just going to be fun today for if you're just curious how all this magic works. We're very proud to launch the new Google Cast SDK and build in a ton of the knowledge that we've gained over the past 2 or 3 years on how to get this interaction right. Some of the goals that we have for this new SDK are to improve that user experience, to make that simple button press work beautifully, to make the connection between a mobile phone and the big screen or speakers 100% reliable, wonderful in every app. And what's been tricky in the past SDK versions is we've asked you, the developers, to take on a lot of that burden. And I talked a little bit about this on the Wednesday talk. We're going to go in a ton more detail and actually Cast enable all the way through media an app. And what's great about the new SDK is that in what we've done to implement the entire UX, and sometimes we call this the Cast UX guidelines, is that we've provided almost all of the elements of that UX checklist in the SDK. You have a default or built-in behavior for every single one of the elements. And what's great about this is this really should reduce development time. And to not just take my word for it, we've been having a small early access program to get feedback on this, to see how do developers react. And we're getting feedback that on a first-time development, the new SDK reduces initial development time by about 40%, which is pretty large. What's also great is that we've implemented the right abstractions. And we're getting feedback that they're at the right level, such that maintenance on our side and on the app side should be much, much easier, in particular on the iOS side of the SDK. On Android, we had built something called the CCL, or the Cast Companion Library. And that had informed us a lot of what to do going forward. So we incorporated those learnings, as well as other technologies, into the new SDK for Android and iOS. And we'll talk through a lot more of the detail in a few minutes. For those of you who are new to the Cast development model, there's essentially 4 major steps of Cast. The first is discovery. How does a mobile device find out if there's a Chromecast or an Android TV or a Cast TV or a Cast for audio speaker? The next stage is actually casting, where the user presses that Cast button and says, I actually want to make a connection. And the app has to negotiate that connection and launch what's called a receiver application on that Cast endpoint. The third stage is control, sending small messages in between the 2 endpoints. Because in the Cast model, all of the media and all of the data really streams from the cloud to the Cast endpoint, making the phone kind of just a control center, not necessarily having any media run through it. And then if you have to handle disconnect, handling it gracefully. The fourth is kind of pervasive through all, which is reconnect. What happens in between if you change Wi-Fi networks, if you have something that changes in the status of connection in general of your phone. And historically, reconnect was actually really tricky, and we put a lot of the burden in our previous SDKs on the developer to handle it and kind of reinvent the wheel over and over there. Specifically, we interacted with a lot of the lifecycle of your app across these 4 major phases. We did that in discovery by asking you to manage tons of callbacks and pseudo-state management of what the user is trying to do, kind of replicating our states in yours. In control, we essentially made you redo this all over again by having you create and manage essentially a session in your own app that matched to our session. We separated this experience. What we've done in the new SDK is implement the right state management and the right UX, such that we handle the specifics of Cast and the user experience associated with it by delivering you essentially a state manager and a UX that's associated with Cast and getting out of the details of your app. What's awesome about this is for maintenance, we previously asked you, anytime we changed anything in that lifecycle of Cast, to change the lifecycle of your app. Especially in iOS, this was really difficult. So even minor changes would impact your app quite a bit in ways that sometimes you or we didn't expect. So what we've done is implemented the abstraction at the correct place such that you can do app development independent of Cast, and we can continue to improve Cast and deploy SDK updates that really have minor, if not any, impact on your app. From the perspective of migration, what's actually really cool about this too is that migration looks a lot more like ripping out code. It's not going through and finding, I'm going to do it this way here, that way here, the new way here, the old way here. It's actually changing to a new model. So it's a clean migration. I take out these callback and pseudo-state management aspects and move over to the new concept. And because we've made it so easy to implement the first time, we also believe that migrations are going to be very straightforward as well. And we're going through a few initial migrations right now. The new features that we're deploying are along the lines, again, of state management as well as user experience. Specifically, we're delivering device discovery, and we're also delivering the whole Cast session in a new way. And I'll take you through both of these. We've also deployed a reconnection service, which is an optional component but on by default. And this was familiar to those of you who've used CCL, but it's really new and awesome for the iOS developer. In addition to that, we're delivering the entire Cast button and root logic so that you don't have to worry about that. It's so specific to the Cast experience that our SDK really should handle all of it. And then on the next item, we're giving you template controllers. So if you're one of those developers who's looking at enabling your app for Cast, this gets you started way, way faster, whether it's just getting an MVP out the gate or something that's really production ready, because these controllers take the best of our UX experience in Cast and deliver it to you. And when I say template, I mean that you can control what's on these controllers and the actions that the user can take while still being adherent to a standard that users would understand across multiple apps, as well as standard in iOS or Android. We've designed these to be very native and feel wonderful in both of those experiences. And I'll show you both of them. The first area that we're going to start with is this concept of a context, or the singleton that unifies all of the state management. What this does is it delivers you a fully managed session from discovery through the concept of casting media. You don't have to manage these in kind of two different separate ways, and you don't have to deal with all the complexities in each side. We also provide you a reconnection service in this. Because we understand state, and because we understand the transitions, we also understand, well, what if the connection state has gone wrong or changed in this state? So we're able to do much more on reconnection, and this is an area that we can innovate in quite a bit on going forward as well. The big takeaway from this is calls to Google API client going forward are not needed. You don't have to make this kind of, again, pseudo state management in your app, as well as kind of figure out what the heck is going on in the Cast SDK. We're now going to actually dive in and cast enable an app. On the left, you see Android, and on the right, you see iOS. We'll start on Android. The first thing that you do in initializing cast context is in the first chunk of code, and I'll simplify this for those of you who don't read 50 lines of code super fast. The first thing we do is essentially set the options for the context. These options include, do I want debugging verbosity? Do I want to be able to actually understand what's going on in the SDK? The other one is, do I want the reconnection service on? That's pretty much it. Essentially set up options, and then you lazily instantiate the actual context. The app that you're looking at, where this code is from one of our code labs. So you'll have a ton of opportunity to dig into this exact same code when we release the code labs later this month, or early in June. What's awesome about this is that this essentially is a view where the user's looking at different videos. And in that view, it's really appropriate to show a cast button. And it's also really appropriate to enable cast. So you can lazily instantiate this context when it's appropriate in your app lifecycle. Similarly, on iOS, you instantiate and create a context options, and then you instantiate the context itself. This is about the simplest we can make a context or state manager with a set of options. I mean, if you're developing a singleton that manages all states of an SDK, this is about as simple as we can do. Essentially a set of options and instantiate the singleton. What's great about this experience for the iOS developer is this is a lot better. If you haven't worked with our previous SDK, this is huge advancement in terms of what you're going to get for free coming forward. The other aspect of this is that we can now do discovery in a much more simple way. And what that discovery is essentially just creating a cast button. So once you've created a cast button, you can essentially just trust everything else for free afterwards. Creating a cast button in Android looks pretty simple. Essentially, all you do is use a cast button factory to generate a button in the colors that you need. And that the colors are inherited in the same way that you do Android UX in general. And what's awesome about this is you can just trust this method to give you a fully functional cast button that does all of the logic going forward. So when the user presses that cast button, they get all of the route discovery for free, and you get all the route discovery for free. And if they back out of this flow, you don't have to manage callbacks to understand whether or not the user's kind of actually casted or not casted, and you understand the state of all the different cast endpoints. In addition, you effectively get knowledge in a reconnect of whether or not the user's already casting. So the reason I show the picture on the right is that if you come back, or the app's been backgrounding, and you come back to foreground, we handle filling in the cast button. And we handle figuring out, is the user already playing media? That's in the SDK now. Similarly, on the iOS side, we use a factory method to generate a cast button. And what you're starting to see, I'd say, consistency in is that the same way you think about developing for Android, or the same way that you think about structuring your Android development, we are taking to iOS. And historically, these worlds were really far apart. The ways that we asked developers to work were kind of night and day. And what we're doing is making the development concepts and the architecture concepts and the naming of objects as close to possible across the two. So similarly, you have a cast button creator. Now, it's kind of iOS friendly, so if you're an iOS developer, you'd understand the nature of how we've structured it. So we're not trying to unify things we shouldn't unify, but we're getting as close as we really should. So you create a cast button using the factory method. You can actually specify what color you want, and then off to the races. You get, again, all of the cast lifecycle for free. So if the user presses the cast button, the next image is, well, if they're not casting, what do you show? You show different routes. You show options for where you can then connect to. You show the living room. You show another cast endpoint that's already playing something. If that user had pressed the cast button and they were already playing media, we show in an iOS compliant way, in UX compliant to iOS standards, that there's media already playing, giving the user a view towards volume control and play and pause. And then if there's no media playing, we do the right thing as well. We handle volume control. We're now going to actually cast media. And what's cool about this is this gets a lot simpler too. Again, we manage the session. We give you access to that session at any time. And I'm going to go forward in just Android. We can take questions later on iOS as well. The first thing you need to do in your app is have a concept of being either local or remote. So similar to me walking or traveling and wanting to watch the Red Sox on the road, that would be a concept of playing the app locally. If I want to cast, you have to have a concept of, okay, I'm playing media remotely, and you can handle this enumeration or this logic in any way matters really to your app. The next thing is you actually want to cast that media. You're in a state of starting a remote session. So this logic is somewhat specific to the demo app and somewhat specific to our code lab, but the concept is pretty straightforward. I want to load some remote media. I essentially just call and get a remote media client, and then essentially ask for that media to be built, and then connect to it. Now, you do that with a standard way of generating media, including, in the next few rows, metadata, like what type of media is this? And we support a few different types, which would help standardize which controls are the most appropriate if the user were actually trying to control this with the lock screen notification or the cast app. So a movie is appropriate to have a play and pause button. Some other types of media aren't appropriate to have that. So if it's live media, for example. And then you effectively give a URL. And for those of you who are working with DRM-enabled content, nothing really changes in terms of the authentication aspects or trying to manage different DRM schemes. You'd still likely use a custom data channel to pass over auth and manage authentication and DRM on the receiver side. Because honestly, in the authentication side, every app does things kind of differently in minor ways that end up having major impact. But the media side of this is much, much more straightforward. And the impact of that comes in control. In Android, we now give you essentially this session concept where you can be a listener to every different aspect of the session. And I've put a few examples up on the screen. So you can understand and be a listener and then change behavior when starting a cast session using this listener concept. You can also manage items like a disconnect event and handle them beautifully or gracefully. And there are a variety of different mechanisms or different items that you can listen to through each session. What's great about this is that you don't have to do heavy lifting of parts of the session that you don't want to listen to, or aspects where you kind of have to say, I need to know everything in order to do one small thing. And that is a really more, I would say, much more abstractable architecture than you've had in the past. Now again, all of the code that you're seeing here comes from the code lab that will launch within the next month with the SDK. What you get once you've established a connection, once you've casted media, once you've established or listened to a session is the full UX of Cast. So out of the gate, again, this reduces your development time a ton. The first item you get is what's called a mini controller, which is a persistent small controller that is available to you to optionally use at the bottom of the screen throughout the life cycle of your app while casting. The next area is an expanded controller. Now what's great about this, in each one of these controllers, is you can control the buttons that matter to you. You can even control the count of buttons. So if you don't need 5 buttons in an expanded controller, we have a way of using only 1, 2, 3, and reflowing them beautifully. So say, for instance, you're a live app, and you have no concept of queue skipping, which you see here, or play pause. You can have the buttons that matter most for you, whether it's a star, kind of saying favorite, I like this show, I might want to watch it again, or if you're a music app and you have a very specific way or logic around what you do when someone likes a song, or like a heart, a star, a thumbs up, you can implement that. Similarly on the mini controller, if that thumbs up is the most important thing that is in the app, or thumbs down does something different than just an advanced queue, you can put that there as well. So those two screens are really, really extensible and flexible. They come out more midsummer, not in the initial release of the SDK, but they're available, again, both on Android and iOS. On Android, you get an additional benefit of having a lock screen notification automatically. And what's great about this is that connects to the media metadata that I talked about earlier. So if you've described what type of media you're playing, we do the right thing on the lock screen. The last area is something which we use to help notify users about Cast. And what we found in studies with top-tier apps is that this actually drives more usage, not just of Cast, but longer session lengths, as well as more adherence to the app itself. It's pretty self-serving for our team to say, hey, cast more. But this actually has an impact for the developer to help users become more aware of the cast feature in the app, as well as cast sessions and the cast usage, driving longer usage of the app itself. The customizable controllers, I think this is an area where you might look at it and say, should I use them or should I not use them going forward? In any new development, I would say test them out, kick the tires, and give us feedback about where you think you would need more customization or where you need more capability. If you're looking at how you support your app and you already have a way of doing second screen control, like you're a music app and you've already had to invest in this for Bluetooth type playing, we can connect to your logic as well, and you don't need to use these template controllers. But if you want to reduce the maintenance cost of maintaining this cast experience, as well as get the best of our UX knowledge in terms of what we test and work with users on, in terms of how to do control of a second screen experience, this is a really strong opportunity to reduce that burden on your team while also improving the user experience in general. The impact here is really that we should reduce development time. From the beginning, from maintenance, from pretty much every aspect of the SDK. And reducing development time initially is pretty much what we had done before. We had given you a set of, I would say, SDK components and then template boilerplate code to throw into your app. And honestly, over time, that initial out-of-the-box fast start became pretty costly because we didn't have the right abstractions. We didn't have all the components that you would have needed to build an end-to-end app. What's great about our framework going forward is that we reduce development time for you in an initial development, as well as reducing the development time for you in ongoing maintenance on our SDK or ongoing maintenance on your app. You don't have to be aware of all the externalities that you may introduce into the cast lifecycle in an app refactoring. At the same time, when we make refactorings or changes, you don't have to worry about the impact on your app either. What's awesome about this is it includes all the elements of the cast lifecycle. And the cast lifecycle itself has, again, some unique aspects. So as we look at innovating on that, if we see opportunities to refine it, we can do so without impacting your apps as well. So for example, if we find out that a router in a particular country needs a few different milliseconds of latency because of how it connects, we don't have to ask you to refactor your entire app for us to improve the quality of the cast experience. This gives us a strong foundation for improving the Cast model as well, whether it's making it faster for users, whether it's helping you with doing things like launching your receiver faster as well. We can have a much better framework going forward without having to interact with your app lifecycle. The timing of this, and I'll talk through this quite a bit, the timing of this is we'll launch the new SDK over the next 4 weeks. The core of it is in the next release of Google Play Services, and on the iOS side, we'll be releasing it in a similar time frame. Going forward, we'll look to release pretty much on the same cadence, both on Android and iOS, with new features. We're also not deprecating CCL, and we're not deprecating the existing SDK for the time being. We know a lot of apps take a significant amount of time to evaluate both when they change SDK versions as well as when they change SDK capabilities. We do think that there's an opportunity for any new development. This is really ready to go. It's ready to go, and it's much, much faster to work with, and it will improve the maintenance of your app. Also going forward, the expanded controllers come out in the mid-summer timeframe. And we're looking for feedback as well as if you, again, see anything in customization that you would need. In general, this has been developed significantly with your feedback, whether it's feedback around the CCL, feedback around the iOS experience, and we look forward to incorporating that feedback into the SDK because we, again, have a much better framework for being able to roll out updates. On the side of the receiver, we're looking to deliver a receiver that brings in a lot of the same out-of-the-box functionality towards the end of the summer. So for the side of it that resides on the Cast endpoint. So we're looking, and we'll engage with a lot of you on that receiver framework and get feedback as well. And on the web sender side, that similarly should land end of summer or early fall. What's next for where you should go from here? We're going to be launching code labs with essentially the exact same code that you saw in that same next 4 weeks time period. You also can dive into full sample apps, the Cast video apps, over the next few weeks as well. And you'll be able to see how we did Cast and how we made use of the new SDK. The other side of this is, again, we love your feedback. Whether it's engaging with our developer community or engaging directly with our teams, we'll be right out in the sandbox for a good chunk of the day today. And many of you in the room, I know, we have lots of dialogue on this SDK as well. So going forward, our SDK is much more maintainable, much more updatable, and has much less impact on your app. What's really great about this is that maintenance should be reduced, and the out-of-the-box benefit, again, is about a 40% reduction in development time. And this is huge for your app and for the SDK itself. I think that's it. Thank you all.